Have you ever walked away from a conversation only to replay it over and over in your mind? Maybe it was something you said, maybe it was something you didn't say. Hours later, you're still imagining different versions of the same moment, wondering if your words sounded strange, if your silence meant something, or if the other person noticed something you missed. To everyone else, the conversation ended. But for you, it keeps going. People who constantly replay conversations often think they're simply overthinking. But that's only part of the story. In many cases, it isn't just about thinking too much. It's about searching for something the mind doesn't feel it received the first time. And once you understand why that happens, many things about yourself begin to make more sense. The interesting thing is that these conversations usually aren't dramatic. They can be completely ordinary. A coworker says something in a different tone than usual. A friend replies with a shorter message than expected. Someone laughs after you make a comment, but you're not sure if they were laughing with you or at you. Most people notice these moments and move on, but some minds don't. Instead, they rewind everything. Every word, every facial expression, every pause, every tiny change in someone's voice. It's almost like reviewing security camera footage, hoping to discover one detail that explains everything. From the outside, this can look like anxiety or insecurity, but psychologically, it's often something deeper. The brain isn't simply remembering the conversation. It's trying to predict whether the relationship is still emotionally safe. That changes everything. For people who replay conversations, social interactions aren't always treated as finished events. They're treated like puzzles that still need solving. The mind keeps asking silent questions. Did they misunderstand me? Did I sound rude? Were they upset? Should I have explained myself differently? Notice something. Most of these questions aren't really about the conversation. They're about uncertainty. The human brain doesn't enjoy uncertainty, but some people experience it much more intensely than others. When there's no clear answer, the brain keeps searching. Not because it enjoys overthinking, because unanswered social situations can feel emotionally unfinished. This often begins much earlier than people realize. Some people grow up in environments where emotional reactions were unpredictable. One day everything felt calm. The next day, someone was angry, disappointed, or distant, and nobody explained why. Over time, the brain learns an important lesson. Pay close attention. Watch every expression. Listen carefully to every change in tone, because missing one signal might have emotional consequences. Years later, that habit doesn't simply disappear. It quietly follows people into friendships, workplaces, and relationships. Even when there's no real danger, the brain continues scanning for hidden meaning, not because the present is unsafe, because the past taught it to stay prepared. That's why replaying conversations isn't always about low confidence. Sometimes, it's a survival strategy that stayed active long after it was needed. Another interesting pattern is that people who replay conversations are often highly aware of other people's emotions. They notice small shifts that many others overlook. Someone smiles less than usual. Someone hesitates before answering. Someone seems slightly quieter. These details don't escape them. Their attention naturally collects emotional information. That can make them thoughtful friends and careful listeners. But it also means their minds rarely stop gathering evidence. The problem is that the brain doesn't separate useful information from imagined possibilities. It simply keeps building stories. One possibility becomes 5. 5 possibilities become 20. Eventually, the original conversation becomes difficult to recognize because it's been surrounded by endless interpretations. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people believe replaying conversations happens because someone lacks confidence. There is also something else happening beneath the surface. Many people who replay conversations care deeply about being understood, not admired, not praised, simply understood. When they feel misunderstood, even in small ways, something inside them remains unsettled. The conversation feels incomplete, not because they need everyone to agree with them, because being misunderstood can quietly feel like being unseen. So the mind keeps rewriting the moment, searching for the version where everything would have made sense. And perhaps that's why replaying conversations can become exhausting. Not because the conversations are complicated, but because every conversation begins carrying emotional questions that were never really about that conversation at all. Questions about belonging, acceptance, safety, connection, and identity. The words spoken today often awaken feelings that have existed for much longer. That's why the same interaction that one person forgets in 5 minutes might stay with someone else for days. It was never just about the words. It was about what those words represented. The need to understand, the hope of being accepted, the fear of getting something wrong, and the quiet desire to know that the relationship is still okay. Once you begin noticing this pattern, replaying conversations starts looking very different. It no longer seems like random overthinking. It begins to look like a mind that learned to protect itself by paying close attention to people. That isn't weakness, it's protection. It's a pattern built from experience, repeated so many times that it became automatic. And like many psychological patterns, it often continues long after the original reason has faded. Once you see it, you can't really unsee it. The conversation was never only happening between you and another person. Part of it was happening between your present self and experiences your mind still remembers. It was never random, it was a pattern. And sometimes, simply recognizing the pattern is the first moment it finally begins to make sense. If this explains something you've quietly noticed about yourself, there's always more beneath the surface. Human behavior is full of patterns that seem ordinary until you understand what they're really trying to protect.